A fantastically, brilliantly sardonic interlude in George Eliot's first novel, Adam Bede, chapter 17, in which the story pauses a little. This rector of Broxton is little better than a pagan, I hear one of my lady readers exclaim. How much more edifying it would have been if you had made him give Arthur some truly spiritual advice. You might have put into his mouth the most beautiful things, quite as good as reading a sermon. Certainly I could, my fair critic, if I were a clever novelist, not obliged to creep servilely after nature and fact, but able to represent things as they never have been and never will be. Then, of course, my characters would be entirely of my own choosing. And I could select the most unexceptionable type of clergyman and put my own admirable opinions into his mouth on all occasions. But you must have perceived long ago that I have no such lofty vocation, and that I aspire to give no more than a faithful account of men and things as they have mirrored themselves in my mind. The mirror is doubtless defective. The outlines will sometimes be disturbed, the reflection faint or confused. But I feel as much bound to tell you as precisely as I can what that reflection is, as if I were in the witness box, narrating my experience on oath. 60 years ago. It is a long time, so no wonder things have changed. All clergymen were not zealous. Indeed, there is reason to believe that the number of zealous clergymen was small. And it is probable that if one among the small minority had owned the livings of Broxton and Hayslope in the year 1799, you would have liked him no better than you like Mr. Irvine. 10 to 1, you would have thought him a tasteless, indiscreet, methodistical man. It is so very rarely that facts hit that nice medium required by our own enlightened opinions and refined taste. Perhaps you will say, do improve the facts a little then. Make them more accordant with those correct views which it is our privilege to possess. The world is not just what we like. Do touch it up with a tasteful pencil, and make believe it is not just quite such a mixed, entangled affair. Let all people who hold unexceptionable opinions act unexceptionably. Let your most faulty characters always be on the wrong side, and your virtuous ones on the right. Then we shall see at a glance whom we are to condemn and whom we are to approve. Then we shall be able to admire without the slightest disturbance of our prepossessions. We shall hate and despise with that true ruminant relish which belongs to undoubting confidence. But, my good friend, what will you do then with your fellow parishioner who opposes your husband in the vestry? With your newly appointed vicar whose style of preaching you find painfully below that of his regretted predecessor? With the honest servant who worries your soul with her one failing? With your neighbor, Mrs. Green, who was really kind to you in your last illness, but has said several ill-natured things about you since your convalescence? Nay, with your excellent husband himself, who has other irritating habits besides that of not wiping his shoes. These fellow mortals, every one, must be accepted as they are. You can neither straighten their noses, nor brighten their wit, nor rectify their dispositions. And if it is these people amongst whom your life is passed, that it is needful you should tolerate, pity, and love, it is these more or less ugly, stupid, inconsistent people, whose movements of goodness you should be able to admire, for whom you should cherish all possible hopes, all possible patience. And I would not even, I think, had I the choice, be the clever novelist who could create a world so much better than this, in which we get up in the morning to do our daily work, that you would likely turn a harder, colder eye on the dusty streets and the common green fields. on the real, breathing men and women, who can be chilled by your indifference or injured by your prejudice, who can be cheered and helped onward by your fellow feeling, your forbearance, your outspoken, brave justice. So I am content to tell my simple story without trying to make things seem better than they were, dreading nothing indeed but falsity, which in spite of one's best efforts, there is reason to dread. Falsehood is so easy, truth so difficult. The pencil is conscious of a delightful facility in drawing a griffin. The longer the claws and the larger the wings, the better. But that marvelous facility, which we mistook for genius, is apt to forsake us when we want to draw a real, unexaggerated lion. Examine your words well, and you will find that even when you have no motive to be false, it is a very hard thing to say the exact truth. Even about your own immediate feelings. Much harder than to say something fine about them, which is not the exact truth. It is for this rare, precious quality of truthfulness that I delight in many Dutch paintings, which lofty-minded people despise. I find a source of delicious sympathy in those faithful pictures of a monotonous, homely existence, which has been the fate of so many more among my fellow mortals than a life of pomp, or of absolute indigence, of tragic suffering, or of world-stirring actions. I turn without shrinking from cloud-born angels, from prophets and sibyls and heroic warriors, to an old woman bending over her flower pot, or eating her solitary dinner, while the noonday light, softened perhaps by a screen of leaves, falls on her mob cap and just touches the rim of her spinning wheel and her stone jug, and all those cheap, common things which are the precious necessaries of life to her. Or I turn to that village wedding, kept between 4 brown walls, where an awkward bridegroom opens the dance with a high-shouldered, broad-faced bride, while elderly and middle-aged friends look on, with very irregular noses and lips, and probably with quart-pots in their hands, but with an expression of unmistakable contentment and goodwill. "Pho," says my idealistic friend, "what vulgar details! What good is there in taking all these pains to give an exact likeness of old women and clowns? What a low phase of life! What clumsy, ugly people! But, bless us, things may be lovable that are not altogether handsome, I hope. I am not at all sure that the majority of the human race have not been ugly, and even among those, quote, lords of the kind, the British squat figures, ill-shapen nostrils, and dingy complexions are not startling exceptions. Yet there is a great deal of family love amongst us. I have a friend or two whose class of features is such that the Apollo curl on the summit of their brows would be decidedly trying. Yet to my certain knowledge, tender hearts have beaten for them, and their miniatures, flattering, but still not lovely, are kissed in secret by motherly lips. I have seen many an excellent matron who could never in her best days have been handsome, and yet she had a packet of yellow love letters in a private drawer, and sweet children showered kisses on her sallow cheeks. And I believe there have been plenty of young heroes of middle stature and feeble beards who have felt quite sure they could never love anything more insignificant than a Diana, and yet have found themselves in middle life, happily settled with a wife who waddles. Yes, thank God human feeling is like the mighty rivers that bless the earth. It does not wait for beauty. It flows with resistless force and brings beauty with it. All honor and reverence to the divine beauty of form. Let us cultivate it to the utmost in men, women, and children, in our gardens and in our houses. But let us love that other beauty, too, which lies in no secret of proportion, but in the secret of deep human sympathy. Paint us an angel, if you can, with a floating violet robe and a face paled by the celestial light. Paint us yet oftener a Madonna, turning her mild face upward and opening her arms to welcome the divine glory. But do not impose on us any aesthetic rules which shall banish from the region of art Those old women scraping carrots with their work-worn hands. Those heavy clowns taking holiday in a dingy pothouse. Those rounded backs and stupid weather-beaten faces that have bent over the spade and done the rough work of the world. Those homes with their tin pans, their brown pitchers, their rough curs, and their clusters of onions. In this world, there are so many of these common, coarse people who have no picturesque, sentimental wretchedness. It is so needful we should remember their existence, else we may happen to leave them quite out of our religion and philosophy, and frame lofty theories which only fit a world of extremes. Therefore, let art always remind us of them. Let us always have men ready to give the loving pains of a life to the faithful representing of commonplace things. Men who see beauty in these commonplace things, and delight in showing how kindly the light of heaven falls on them. There are few prophets in the world, few sublimely beautiful women, few heroes. I can't afford to give all my love and reverence to such rarities. I want a great deal of those feelings for my everyday fellow men, especially for the few in the foreground of the great multitude, whose faces I know, whose hands I touch, for whom I have to make way with kindly courtesy. Neither are picturesque lazzaroni or romantic criminals half so frequent as your common laborer, who gets his own bread and eats it vulgarly but creditably with his own pocket knife. It is more needful that I should have a fiber of sympathy connecting me with that vulgar citizen who weighs out my sugar in a vilely assorted cravat and waistcoat than with the handsome rascal in red scarf and green feathers. More needful that my heart should swell with loving admiration at some trait of gentle goodness in the faulty people who sit at the same hearth with me, or in the clergyman of my own parish, who is perhaps rather too corpulent, and in other respects is not an Oberlin or a Tillotson, than at the deeds of heroes whom I shall never know except by hearsay, or at the sublimest abstract of all clerical graces that was ever conceived by an able novelist. Not the end of the chapter, but let's stop there.